Welcome to the global Warwatch network. The battlefield is no longer Earth. Satellites are being weaponized, nations are racing to control the skies, and the next global war might begin in space. Are we ready for the space arms race? Today, we're embarking on a critical exploration of this rapidly evolving frontier. Our mission is to really dig into a stack of recent reports, analyses, and historical accounts. We want to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight for you, to cut through the noise and give you a shortcut to being truly well-informed about the immense stakes involved here. We're talking about the militarization and maybe even the potential weaponization of space.
Absolutely. And the urgency, the complexity of this topic, it really can't be overstated. Space isn't just some distant abstract thing for scientists anymore. It's a rapidly evolving domain that impacts literally everyone on Earth. Think about how our militaries operate, how the global economy functions, even just our daily lives. It really demands our attention. And understanding the nuances is just paramount right now.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Before we really dive into the specifics of who's doing what up there, we absolutely need to clarify some fundamental terms because these words, they often get mixed up, in public discussion when we talk about military activities in space. Getting the distinctions right is crucial to understanding this whole landscape.
That's a great place to start. Precision is key here.
So first up, the militarization of space. What exactly does that mean?
Right. Militarization basically refers to the development and deployment of military assets and technology in Earth's orbit and outer space. Think of it as putting military eyes, ears, and communication relays up there. It covers systems specifically designed for things like surveillance, communication, navigation like GPS, and intelligence gathering.
So it's about establishing a military presence and capability in space, primarily to support operations down here on Earth, but not necessarily about having weapons in space aimed at other things in space.
Exactly. It's support-focused, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Establishing capability, yes, but not inherently offensive in the sense of space-to-space conflict.
And you mentioned this isn't exactly new.
Not at all, not by a long shot. Its historical roots actually go back even before the Cold War, although that era certainly poured fuel on the fire. The very first human-made objects to reach the boundary of space were actually German V-2 rockets. We're talking back in 1944 during World War II.
P2s. Wow, I didn't realize they reached space.
They did, technically crossing the Kármán line.
Hmm.
And fundamentally, they were weapon delivery systems. They could carry, about 2,200 pounds of explosives, roughly 200 miles. Their existence undoubtedly laid the groundwork for future military uses of rocketry in space.
Okay, so the very first steps were military.
In a sense, yes. Then, fast forward to the Cold War, roughly 1947 to 1991. Both the U.S. and the Soviet Union were incredibly quick to see the strategic value of space. You probably remember the launch of Sputnik by the Soviets in 1957.
Right, the satellite that beeps.
Wow.
A huge moment.
A huge moment. And while it was presented primarily as a scientific achievement, showing off Soviet tech, well, it immediately triggered massive military interest in orbital capabilities. Suddenly, reconnaissance and communication from space seemed very real.
And the U.S. response?
Swift. The U.S. rapidly ramped up its own scientific and military space projects, things like surveillance satellites, Weapon System 117L, for example. That eventually led to classified programs like Discover, which had the code name Corona. These were spy missions.
Actual spy satellites.
Yes. The first successful U.S. spy satellite mission, Discover the Earth, brought back film in August 1960. So you see, militarization has been a core part of great power competition for decades now.
So this militarization using space for things like spy satellites, communication relays, that's become pretty much accepted, hasn't it? Many nations see it as necessary for defense and intelligence.
Largely, yes. It's become a sort of accepted norm, a baseline capability that major powers expect to have. But then there's that critical and much more contentious distinction we need to make.
Right, the weaponization of space. How is that different?
Weaponization specifically refers to deploying offensive weapons in space. Systems designed to directly engage, damage, destroy, or disable other space objects, like satellites.
Okay, so not just eyes and ears, but actual fists.
That's a good way to put it. While militarization has been ongoing and, as you said, is widely accepted, weaponization implies a direct extension of armed conflict into the orbital environment. And that carries significantly greater risks than just having military satellites observing things. It's about the capacity to directly attack targets in space. This distinction, it seems subtle, but it has profound implications for stability and how nations see each other's actions.
Now, a lot of people listening might be thinking, wait a minute, isn't there some kind of international agreement Something that prevents all this weaponization, or at least the really bad stuff.
That's a common question, and yes, there is. The cornerstone is the Outer Space Treaty of 1967.
The foundational treaty. But you're hinting it has issues.
It was meant to be this guardian, yes, a bedrock of international space law. But it has some, let's say, crucial limitations that are becoming really stark today.
What's fascinating here is the gap between the treaty's intent and how it's applied in practice.
Exactly. It came into force on October 10th, 1967, right in the thick of the Cold War. Its main goal was absolutely to ensure space is used only for peaceful purposes. Its key provisions explicitly ban deploying nuclear weapons or any other kinds of weapons of mass destruction, WMDs in Earth's orbit or on the moon or anywhere else in space.
Okay, so no nukes in orbit. That's clear.
Right. And it also bans military bases, installations, weapon testing, or military exercises on the moon and other celestial bodies.
Yeah.
On the surface, it sounds pretty comprehensive, doesn't it?
It really does. And you mentioned it has broad reach.
Incredibly broad. As of June 2024, 115 countries are party to it, including all the major players, the US, Russia, China. So on paper, it looks like a strong framework for peace.
But there's a but. What's the crucial limitation?
The but is huge. Despite that emphasis on peaceful purposes and the WMD ban, the treaty does not explicitly forbid the militarization of space in general.
Ah, so it allows some military activity.
Yes. This legal ambiguity creates a significant and growing challenge. It permits non-nuclear conventional weapons in space, though none are openly deployed yet. More importantly, it places absolutely no restrictions on military satellites used for surveillance, navigation, or directing ground operations, the very things we defined as militarization.
So it bans the absolute worst weapons, but leaves the door wide open for everything else.
Essentially, yes. And this ambiguity is where the problem lies. It means actions that one nation might see as purely defensive militarization, maybe developing a satellite that can get close to another for inspection.
Another nation could see that as a potential weapon, right? A destabilizing move.
Precisely. That same inspection satellite could potentially be used to interfere or attack. So this gray area allows for an arms race to proceed without technically violating the letter of the treaty. It makes achieving a truly peaceful space domain incredibly difficult.
That legal gray area really does complicate things, and it leads us right into another key concept we need to understand. Counterspace capabilities. These are the actual tools of disruption we're starting to see.
Right. Counterspace capabilities. These are the techniques, the assets, the capabilities designed specifically to deliberately deny, disrupt, degrade, damage, or destroy another space object or a part of a space system.
So messing with other people's stuff in space.
Basically, yes. The goal is
Sure.
clear. Gain an advantage over an adversary. And this can be done reversibly, like jamming a signal, or irreversibly, like, well, blowing something up.
Yeah.
And these capabilities can be offensive or defensive.
How are they categorized? Is there a breakdown?
Broadly, yes. Reports often classify them into a few main types. First, you have kinetic physical capabilities. These literally involve hitting or destroying space objects physically. Think missiles hitting satellites. This is the one that creates all the debris.
Okay, kinetic, physical. What else?
Then there are non-kinetic physical capabilities. These interfere with the satellite's operation without smashing it. This could be things like blinding sensors with lasers or jamming communication signals. Disruptive, but potentially less permanent and less debris generating.
Less messy, potentially.
Potentially. And finally, you have electronic and cyber capabilities. These target the digital side, the ground control stations, the communication links, the software on the satellites themselves. Think hacking.
And when we talk about actual weapons in space or targeting space, how did those break down?
We can categorize them by where they launch from and what they target. First, Earth-to-space weapons. These are launched from the ground to hit things in space, usually satellites in low Earth orbit. The classic example is an anti-satellite missile, or ASAT.
Okay, ground-launched missiles.
Second, space-to-space weapons. These are essentially satellites designed to operate near, interfere with, or potentially attack other satellites. These are sometimes called inspector satellites, or involve rendezvous and proximity operations, RPO, which have that tricky dual-use potential.
Satellites attacking other satellites. Got it.
And third, largely theoretical for now, but definitely discussed, are space-to-Earth weapons. These would be weapons deployed in orbit designed to strike targets on Earth. Think orbital bombardment systems, like in science fiction.
Right, the stuff of sci-fi hopefully stays that way. Let's talk specifics, though. What are some examples of these counterspace capabilities that actually exist or are being developed?
Okay, well, the most concrete example is direct-to-send anti-satellite missiles, or DAASATs. These are ground-based missiles designed to fly straight up and hit a satellite in orbit. We've seen several public tests of these by major powers as China, the U.S., Russia, India. Intercepting something moving at, 17,000 miles per hour is an incredible technical feat requiring immense precision. And as we noted, these create a lot of debris.
Right, the debris problem again. What about those space-to-space systems?
Those are the co-orbital systems. These are satellites designed specifically to maneuver very close to other satellites. Now, they could be used for benign purposes, inspection, maybe repair, future refueling, but the concern is their inherent dual-use nature. A satellite that can get close enough to repair could also get close enough to jam, disable, or even physically interfere with or attack another satellite.
And it's hard to tell the difference from the ground.
Exactly. Intent is incredibly difficult to discern. Then you have cyber attacks. These are a huge concern. Methods used to disable or hijack satellite operations completely remotely, without any physical interaction. Imagine compromising a critical military communications network, or worse, taking control of a navigation satellite system. It's a silent, potentially devastating form of attack that leaves no physical evidence in space itself.
A stealth weapon, in effect.
Very much so. And finally, there's a lot of research, a lot of talk about directed energy weapons.
Lasers in space.
Lasers, high-power microwaves, maybe even particle beams someday. These are largely experimental or theoretical right now. The power requirements, the challenges of focusing energy over vast distances in space are immense. But the potential is there using directed energy to permanently blind sensors, fry electronics, or disrupt communications on satellites without creating kinetic debris. It's another area of active development and concern.
So a whole toolkit of potential disruption, from missiles to cyber attacks to lasers. It really paints a picture of a complex and potentially dangerous environment up there.
It absolutely does. Far removed from the peaceful frontier it once seemed.
Which brings us to the big question, why? Why is this happening? Here's where it gets really interesting. Why are nations investing so heavily and competing so fiercely in this domain? It seems to boil down to a few key strategic drivers.
Absolutely. There are powerful forces pushing this competition forward.
And maybe the biggest one is simply ensuring national security and military superiority. Modern militaries seem utterly dependent on space now.
That's not an overstatement. They are incredibly deeply reliant on satellites. We're talking about near total dependence for almost every aspect of modern warfare. Communication networks linking troops globally. Navigation GPS is fundamental not just for getting around, but for precision-guided weapons and, of course, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, ISR, getting that real-time picture of the battlefield.
It's not just helpful anymore, it's essential.
It's absolutely essential. These satellites are core components of defense infrastructure. Think missile early warning systems, encrypted comms, links, keeping forces connected across vast distances. They underpin everything.
And there was that stat about the UK military.
Yes, sources indicate that over 90% of the United Kingdom's military equipment relies on space-based technology in some way.
90%. That's staggering.
It is, and it highlights the vulnerability. If you can disable or compromise these systems, you could potentially devastate a nation's ability to command and control its forces. You could severely reduce combat effectiveness, impair strategic decision-making in a crisis. So protecting these assets becomes a top national security priority.
Which means developing ways to defend them.
Exactly. Defensive counterspace capabilities.
Yeah.
But it also incentivizes developing offensive capabilities to potentially deny those advantages to an adversary. It's that classic security dilemma playing out again, but this time in orbit.
Okay, so military advantage is huge. But it's not just about the military, is it? There's also economic dominance and control over critical infrastructure.
That's right. The economic leverage is enormous. Control over critical space infrastructure like GPS and communication satellites gives a significant strategic advantage that goes far beyond the battlefield. These systems are integral to global trade, think shipping logistics. They're vital for resource management, precision agriculture, weather forecasting. The list is almost endless.
Even financial markets rely on the timing signals from GPS.
Precisely. So the disruption of civilian space infrastructure, even if it's just collateral damage from a conflict, could potentially cripple economies. It demonstrates the huge economic power associated with space capabilities. It's a fundamental pillar of the modern globalized world.
And then there's the sheer political influence and power projection. Being a space power means something on the world stage.
It absolutely does. Having advanced space capabilities enhances diplomatic leverage. It shapes international relations. Being recognized as a leading space power contributes significantly to a nation's overall image of power. It's a unique kind of prestige, signaling not just military strength, but broad economic and technological leadership.
A status symbol, but with real clout.
Exactly. It can influence alliances, affect trade deals, maybe even deter aggression simply by demonstrating that level of technological sophistication and global reach.
Now, there's another layer we need to add, something that's really changing the game. The rise of the private sector, the whole new space age. It's not just governments anymore.
This is a truly transformative shift. We've seen this increasing normalization of privatization, of commercialization in space over recent years. It's what's driving this new space age.
Ah,
You have dramatically lower launch costs thanks to companies like SpaceX. You have smaller, more capable satellites being built faster and cheaper. And private companies are taking on roles that used to belong solely to state space agencies.
And this creates new kinds of competition.
Absolutely. It's not just state versus state anymore. We're seeing intense competition between the most important private capital in the world, as one source puts it,
yes.
particularly between North American and Chinese companies.
So that raises a really important question, doesn't it? How does this growing involvement of private companies with their fast innovation cycles and, frankly, different motivations, how does that affect this military competition? Does it speed it up? Does it complicate it?
Both. Definitely both. On one hand, they bring incredible agility and often lower costs. Think about SpaceX's Starlink constellation. It's become absolutely vital for communications in conflict zones like Ukraine, or Earth observation companies like Planet or ICEYE providing near real-time intelligence. These commercial systems can augment or sometimes even replace traditional slow-to-develop military systems. That accelerates capability development.
But the complications.
The complications are huge. Accountability is a big one. Who's responsible if a private satellite is used for aggressive purposes, or if it gets targeted?
Huh.
How do you regulate a company that might be selling dual-use tech to multiple countries, maybe even adversaries?
Right, the lines get incredibly blurry.
Exactly. The blurring lines between civilian and military assets and how these commercial capabilities are being integrated into national security plans creates massive challenges for policymakers, for diplomats, for international law. It's a whole new dimension.
A really complex new dimension. Okay, let's shift gears now and look at the major players themselves. What are their specific strategies and capabilities? Let's start with the United States. They seem to be leading with this idea of hybrid architectures.
Yes, the U.S. strategy is quite clear now. They see commercial space capabilities as absolutely vital for maintaining global leadership and protecting their interests. It's a core part of their approach. If you look back historically, this isn't entirely new. After Sputnik in '57, the U.S. response was immediate, ramping up both scientific and military space projects. We mentioned the early surveillance satellites like Weapon System 117L, leading to the Corona Spy program, getting those first images back in 1960.
And didn't they have even more ambitious plans early on, something about a moon base?
They did. It sounds wild now, but in 1959, the U.S. seriously proposed Project Horizon. This was a plan for a full-on military base on the moon, potentially capable of launching nuclear missiles at Earth.
Wow, that's ambitious.
Extremely. It never happened, of course, but it shows the thinking at the time. Then, much later, in 1983, you had President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI or Star Wars.
Right, the space-based missile shield idea.
Exactly. Using lasers, particle beams, other advanced tech to shoot down Soviet missiles. It was never fully realized, funding got cut back, but it definitely spurred massive Soviet spending in response. Some argue it even contributed to the economic strain that led to the Soviet Union's collapse in '91.
And the U.S. also demonstrated an ASAT capability.
Yes, they conducted an ASAT test in 2008. The official line was that they were shooting down a malfunctioning spy satellite that posed a hazard due to its toxic fuel. But intentional or not, it clearly demonstrated they had the capability to hit a satellite in orbit.
So that history leads us to today's approach. A big step was creating the U.S. Space Force, right?
A very significant step. Established on December 20, 2019, it became the sixth branch of the U.S. military. Its mission is explicitly focused on space, protecting U.S. interests, protecting satellites, supporting military operations, supporting launches.
And its members are called Guardians.
They are, which emphasizes that protective mission. And a key part of the Space Force strategy now is this push for commercial integration and what they term hybrid space architectures.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, in April 2024, the Department of Defense and the Space Force released complementary strategies. The goal is to move towards systems where commercial capabilities, things like commercial satellites, launch services, data analysis, are fully woven into the military's own space networks.
So not just buying commercial services off the shelf, but integrating them deeply.
Exactly. Instead of relying solely on expensive, sometimes slow-to-deploy military-owned satellites, they want to leverage the commercial market speed and innovation. They're even planning something called the Commercial Augmentation Space Reserve, CASR. The idea is a pool of commercial companies with pre-negotiated contracts, whose capabilities could be quickly activated during a conflict.
Like a reserve force, but with commercial satellites and services.
Precisely. It's a really novel approach. But reports also highlight challenges. Changing the military's traditional, often slow, acquisition culture is hard.
Yeah.
Integrating different technical standards, ensuring cybersecurity across military and commercial systems, that's complex stuff they're still working through.
A major shift in thinking. Now let's turn to China. Their rise in space has been incredibly rapid, hasn't it?
Phenomenal is probably the word. China is rapidly expanding its satellite constellations, its reconnaissance capabilities, everything across the board. It's a massive national priority, covering both military and civil space programs.
And they have a specific strategy for this, something about fusion.
Yes, the Military-Civil Fusion, or MCF strategy. This is a deliberate, top-down national strategy to integrate military and civilian research, development, and resources. The idea is to accelerate technological development for defense by leveraging civilian innovation. So advances in commercial AI or new satellite components from the private sector can be quickly adapted for military space applications. It gives them a potential edge in speed and resource allocation.
And they haven't been shy about demonstrating their counterspace abilities.
Not at all. The big one was in 2007, when China deliberately destroyed one of its own defunct weather satellites, Fengtian 1C, using a ground-launched missile.
The ASAT test that created so much debris.
Exactly. It was an unmistakable demonstration of their anti-satellite capability, and it created thousands of pieces of dangerous space junk, much of which is still up there. It's a very controversial move.
And they followed that up.
In 2013, they tested a missile capable of reaching much higher orbits, up around 18,640 miles or 30,000 kilometers. These are the orbits where critical U.S. military and intelligence satellites operate, like GPS and missile warning systems. So that test sent another strong signal about their reach and intent.
So what does this all mean for the balance of power? China's rapid rise seems to be really shaking things up.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Their swift advancements, combined with the MCF strategy and these demonstrated ASAT capabilities, clearly signal their ambition to challenge U.S. dominance and establish China as a pure space power, maybe even aiming for superiority in some areas. This directly fuels that security dilemma we talked about, forcing other nations to react.
And the private sector competition is fierce there, too.
Very much so. We're seeing a boom in Chinese private space companies, often with significant state support or guidance. They're innovating rapidly in launch, satellite manufacturing, Earth observation, mirroring the U.S. new space trend, but often tightly aligned with national strategic goals. It's another front in the competition.
Okay, let's move on to Russia. Their focus seems to be specifically on challenging Western dominance in space.
That appears to be a key driver, yes. Russia is focusing on developing counterspace weapons specifically designed to challenge the reliance that Western militaries, especially the U.S., have on space assets. We've seen some indicators over the years. Back in 2014, there was a Russian satellite, Cosmos 2499, that was observed making highly unusual agile maneuvers near other objects.
The suspected assassin satellite?
That was the speculation, yes.
Yeah.
An inspector or assassin craft capable of getting very close to other satellites, potentially to interfere or disable them. Its unpredictable movements signaled advanced RPO capabilities, carrying that inherent dual-use threat.
And more recently.
The U.S. and U.K. alleged Russia tested some kind of space-based weapon in 2020, though details were limited. Then in July 2021, Russia conducted its own ASAT test, destroying a defunct satellite and, like China's test, creating a cloud of debris, another clear capability demonstration.
And then there were those dramatic allegations early in 2024.
Yes, February 2024. That really brought things to a head. The U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby went public stating Russia was developing a troubling new space-based anti-satellite weapon.
Space-based, not ground-launched.
Correct. Kirby clarified it wasn't operational yet, no immediate threat, but warned that if deployed, it could pose a lethal risk to astronauts and vital satellites. Crucially, he implied it might be nuclear or nuclear-related, which would be a blatant violation of the 1967 Outer Space Treaty.
A potential treaty violation. How did Russia respond?
Predictably, they denied it strongly. The Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, called the claims a malicious fabrication and suggested it was just a ploy by the White House to drum up support for aid to Ukraine. Standard deflection tactics, really.
But it caused quite a stir in Washington.
It did. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Turner, issued a very unusual public warning about a serious national security threat, demanding declassification. It even caused some political friction within the U.S. The House Speaker, after briefings, confirmed it was a very serious matter.
So, connecting this back to the bigger picture, what's the significance of these allegations, even if Russia denies them?
Well, even if they remain unconfirmed publicly by Russia, these allegations profoundly underscore the deep mistrust and the escalating perceived threats that really define this space arms race. It moves beyond just proven capabilities into the realm of intent and perception, which makes the whole environment much more volatile. The very fact these accusations are being made publicly, regardless of immediate proof, feeds that security dilemma. It compels nations to prepare for worst-case scenarios based on perceived threats, potentially justifying further counterspace developments on all sides.
A dangerous cycle of suspicion. Okay, let's look finally at Europe. They seem to be trying to find their own path, a European way, in this increasingly contested space.
That's right. European nations are definitely showing more interest in using commercial space solutions for security and defense. The war in Ukraine was a real catalyst there. Seeing how effectively commercial systems like ISAT for satellite imagery and Starlink for communications were used really highlighted their value and importance in modern conflict. It was a practical demonstration European defense planners couldn't ignore.
But Europe faces different challenges compared to the U.S., right?
Yes, significant differences. They have a more fragmented space landscape, multiple national agencies, industries that don't always pull in the same direction. Governance is more complex due to coordinating across many sovereign nations. And crucially, the overall military investment in space is much lower. We mentioned France's budget being around $1.3 billion in 2023, compared to the U.S.'s $39 billion. That kind of disparity really limits their ability to develop large, independent military constellations like the U.S. does.
So, given those constraints, what does this European way look like? How are they trying to adapt?
They need to be strategic. Identify specific areas where leveraging commercial capabilities makes the most sense and offers the biggest bang for their buck. Things like space domain awareness, knowing what's up there and what it's doing, seem key. Also, responsive access to space, the ability to quickly launch or replace satellites when needed.
And deciding how much to rely on others.
Exactly. They face a critical choice. Do they prioritize developing purely European providers to build up their own industrial base and autonomy? Or do they keep the door open to companies from allied nations, like the U.S., for redundancy and potentially faster access to cutting-edge tech? This is the whole debate around open strategic autonomy.
Finding that balance, are there examples already?
There are. The UK Skynet 5 program is often cited. It's been a public-private partnership providing secure military satellite communication since way back in 2003, showing that this model isn't entirely new for Europe.
And NATO is playing a role in coordinating this.
Increasingly so. NATO recognizes space as a critical operational domain now. They're actively engaging with the commercial space industry through things like the SpaceNet initiative, industry events, and summits. NATO is even developing its own commercial space strategy. The idea is to encourage European allies to enhance their military space capabilities, partly through these commercial solutions, and to ensure interoperability and collective resilience across the alliance. It's about extending collective defense into orbit.
Okay, so we have this accelerating competition, new players, new technologies. But this isn't happening in a vacuum. There are significant dangers here. What are the real, tangible risks and negative consequences of militarizing and potentially weaponizing space?
The risks are substantial, and they affect everyone. Perhaps the most immediate and visible one is the menace of space debris.
We keep coming back to that.
Because it's such a direct consequence. When satellites are destroyed, kinetically smashed by missiles in ASAT tests, for example, they don't just disappear. They shatter into thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of pieces. China's 2007 test, India's 2019 test, Russia's 2021 test, they all added significantly to the debris population. These fragments, from tiny paint flecks to large chunks, are traveling at orbital speeds, maybe 17,500 miles per hour or more in low orbit.
Like bullets in space?
Exactly. Even a tiny piece hitting another satellite can cause catastrophic damage. This threatens operational spacecraft, military, civilian, scientific, and critically crewed missions like the International Space Station, which has had to maneuver to dodge debris multiple times.
And this leads to the nightmare scenario, the Kessler Syndrome.
Yes, that's the ultimate fear. Named after NASA scientist Donald Kessler, who proposed it. It's a cascading effect. One collision creates debris. That debris causes more collisions, which create even more debris. Eventually, you could reach a point where certain orbital zones, especially the crowded low Earth orbit, become so dense with debris that they're essentially unusable. A high-speed minefield rendering access to space incredibly dangerous, potentially for decades or even centuries. It's a very real long-term threat.
Locking ourselves out of space because of conflict debris, that's terrifying. Okay, beyond the physical danger, what about the political impact? You mentioned amplified geopolitical tensions and the security dilemma.
Absolutely. Extending military competition into space inevitably raises the temperature of geopolitical rivalries. It directly fuels that security dilemma we discussed. One nation develops a new capability it sees as defensive, maybe better satellite tracking. Another nation sees that as a potential threat, enabling targeting. So they respond by developing their own counter capability, maybe something offensive.
And round it goes.
Precisely. Each step taken for perceived security is seen as aggressive by others, compelling them to respond in kind. This constant action-reaction cycle erodes trust, makes diplomacy harder, and just generally makes the world less stable. It's a recipe for an uncontrolled arms race.
And it's not just military assets at risk, right? You highlighted the vulnerability of civilian infrastructure.
This is a critical point that often gets lost. Most commercial and civilian satellites, the ones running our communications, navigation, weather forecasts, financial systems, operate without any real defenses. They're soft targets. In a conflict where space becomes a battlefield, these civilian assets could easily become collateral damage. Or worse, they could be deliberately targeted to cripple an adversary's economy or society.
The ripple effects would be huge.
Catastrophic. Imagine the cascading effects on global supply chains if shipping navigation fails, or on emergency services if communication networks go down, or financial markets if timing signals are lost. It impacts every facet of modern life, far beyond the military sphere.
Another huge challenge you brought up is the dual-use technology dilemma. So much space tech can be used for good or ill.
This ambiguity is a massive hurdle for arms control and trust. A satellite with high-resolution cameras can monitor crops for farmers, or it can provide targeting data for missiles.
Yeah.
A satellite that can maneuver close to another could be for repair or for attack.
How do you verify intent?
It's incredibly difficult. This inherent dual-use nature complicates monitoring, complicates enforcing any potential agreements, and makes building trust extremely hard. Even purely scientific or commercial missions might be viewed with suspicion if their underlying technology could be weaponized. It muddies the waters completely.
Which leads us to the legal and governance challenges. We talked about the Outer Space Treaty's limits. It sounds like the existing framework just isn't keeping up.
It really isn't. The 1967 treaty laid down important principles, like peaceful use and no WMDs. But it lacks teeth, no real enforcement mechanisms, and it doesn't provide detailed rules for military activities beyond WMDs. What exactly constitutes a weapon in space, especially with dual-use tech? It's undefined.
And attempts to update the rules have failed.
Repeatedly. Efforts like the proposed prevention of an arms race in outer space, Pia Orias Treaty at the UN, have stalled for decades. There's just no consensus among the major space powers on definitions, on verification, on what should be allowed or banned.
So a legal vacuum, almost.
Which creates opportunities for misinterpretation, for nations to act unilaterally, for destabilizing behavior. It significantly increases the risk of misunderstandings escalating into conflict because there are no clear red lines or agreed rules of the road.
That sounds like a recipe for the risk of escalation and unpredictable consequences.
It certainly is. The very nature of space operations contributes to this risk. It's often opaque, hard to see exactly what's happening, hard to attribute actions definitively. Was that satellite failure an accident, a malfunction, or an attack?
Uncertainty breeds suspicion.
Exactly. A false alarm, a sensor glitch, a misinterpretation of a maneuver in a tense environment. It could potentially lead to a preemptive reaction with disastrous consequences. And unlike battlefields on Earth, space has no borders, no buffer zones. An incident in orbit could affect everyone, instantly and indiscriminately, making the consequences incredibly far-reaching and hard to predict.
Finally, there's an angle often missed in these strategic discussions: civil liberties and surveillance concerns.
Yes, this is important. Militarized space assets inherently enhance surveillance capabilities, not just for military purposes, but potentially for monitoring civilian populations too. High-resolution imaging from commercial and government satellites signal interception capabilities. It all adds up.
More eyes in the sky, basically.
More and more capable eyes. This proliferation raises legitimate concerns about individual privacy, about the balance between national security needs and fundamental civil liberties. As the ability to monitor globally and persistently from space grows, it could easily tip towards excessive state surveillance, if not managed with strong oversight and clear legal frameworks.
So, wrapping this all up, if we connect everything we've discussed today to the bigger picture, it seems clear space has fundamentally changed.
It really has. It's transformed from this frontier of, primarily scientific exploration and wonder into a critical strategic arena. Some might even say a potential battlefield.
And this massive shift is driven by that deep reliance we now have on space for military power, for economic functioning, for political standing, combined with the rapid development of these sophisticated counter-space capabilities by the major powers.
Precisely. And the existing rules, like the Outer Space Treaty, while important groundwork, just aren't equipped to handle the modern realities. They don't adequately address dual-use technologies, ASAT debris, the huge role of private companies.
So, what's the path forward? How do we avoid the worst-case scenarios?
Well, the consensus among many analysts is clear. Preventing a full-blown destructive arms race in space and ensuring it remains stable and usable for peaceful purposes long-term requires urgent action. That means serious international dialogue, developing clear norms of responsible behavior in space, and ultimately achieving more robust, verifiable multilateral regulations. It's a huge diplomatic and technical challenge, but the stakes are incredibly high.
They certainly are. Which leads me to a final thought for you, our listeners, to ponder. Given how incredibly interconnected our world is now, thanks to space technology, what role do you think international cooperation realistically can play in preventing conflict up there? Or maybe, is it more about shaping how that competition unfolds? How do we build trust and establish clear rules in a domain where the very tools that advance humanity also hold the potential to threaten it? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of space as the next potential battlefield. We encourage you to like, share, and subscribe to the Global Warwatch Network. Please share your thoughts on this topic in the comment section below. We do read them. And join us on social media. All the links you need are provided in the description.